scientific motion does, alienates from science people who know better than to accept such an unjustified metaphysical extrapolation. It alienates intellectuals, particularly from other non-scientific disciplines, and so gives rise to the culture wars that have roiled the academy for the last few decades. And it alienates non-intellectuals whose opinions are more intuitive and practical, but who know that their life is more than some reductionistic description in terms of atoms and molecules. People who make aggressive, anti-theistic claims on behalf of science are not acting as science's champions. They are bringing it into disrepute. They are confusing science with scientism, perhaps for their own polemic purposes. And they are, in the end, misrepresenting science to the public. And therefore, I urge you, whatever may be your religious beliefs, to vote against this erroneous motion.
Thank you, Ian Hutchinson. Our motion is Science Refutes God. And here to speak in support of the motion, Michael Shermer. He is the founding publisher of Skeptic Magazine and a columnist for Scientific American.
When I was a Christian and I matriculated at Pepperdine University, I was in what I call the bubble. I was in the bubble where everybody around you believes. And in that bubble, the Christian worldview, like any other worldview, is internally consistent, it's inherently logical, it's reinforced by everybody around you until you step outside of the bubble. What happened with me is I went to graduate school and I started to study social psychology, anthropology, psychology of beliefs, and so on. And there I realized that none of those arguments actually make sense in and of themselves, the arguments for God's existence. What it became clear to me is that what happens is you arrive at beliefs for non-rational, non-smart reasons, and then you back into it after the fact with rational reasons to justify it. We call this the confirmation bias. And so for me, I think there's overwhelming evidence that I've given you tonight that there's good anthropological, social science reasons why people believe in God that doesn't prove there's a God, but it proves that we create gods in our heads. In addition to that, I don't think there's any evidence to support that there actually is a God out there separate from our beliefs. But finally, my final point is this, is that I don't even think it's possible for there to be a God, at least not a supernatural God. In this way, if God is supernatural, that is outside of space and time, there's no way for us to know him. Therefore, whatever God is, it would have to be a natural being, or at least some kind of a being that reaches in to stir the particles. And if he does, then we should be able to measure it, because that's what we do as scientists. We measure the motions of particles. And so far, we have no evidence of that. So therefore, I think that the most we could hope to find would be some kind of a natural being, in which case it would just become part of science, and that would be the end of the whole God concept. So if you agree with me that the evidence points in that direction, that we constructed gods and not vice versa, I would urge you to vote on our side for the proposition that science refutes God.
Thank you, Michael Shermer. And that is our motion, Science Refutes God. And here to summarize his position against the motion, Dinesh D'Souza. He is the best-selling author of What's So Great About Christianity, and he is the director of 2016 Obama's America.
If science refutes God, you'd expect that one person who would know that would be Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin has supplied modern atheism with perhaps the strongest argument against God, evolution. And yet when Darwin published his evolution theory, the Harvard biologist, the American biologist Asa Gray wrote Darwin a letter in which he said, as a Christian, I was very inspired upon reading your book, because I have read in the book of Genesis that God made the world and God made man, but there's no information about how this might have occurred. And when I read your book, I understood not only why God made humans, but why there's so much suffering in the world. Evolution helps to account for the reason why there's suffering both for humans but also in the animal kingdom. Darwin was so thrilled at receiving this letter that he published it in future editions of The Origin of Species. So in other words, for Darwin, what actually caused him to lose his own faith, which he did, had nothing to do with evolution. According to Darwin's biographers, and there are many of them, Darwin lost his faith because he lost one of his daughters, Annie. It was a terrible, unexpected death. Darwin blamed God for it and turned against God. It was the issue of suffering, not science, that turned Darwin against God. Now, we're debating here, has science refuted God? And in some senses, we've been talking past each other. If I take a pot of water and put it on the stove, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to make a cup of tea. Now, Lawrence Krauss could come along and say that the molecules are heating up. He could give a full scientific account of what's going on, but he would have completely missed the purpose behind what I'm doing. The scientific explanation doesn't refute the purposeful explanation. It coexists alongside it, and so it is with God. Thank you.
Thank you, Dinesh D'Souza. Science refutes God is our motion, and here to summarize his position in support of this motion, Lawrence Krauss. He is a theoretical physicist and director of the Origins Project at Arizona State University.
Human beings were clearly programmed by evolution to impute intentionality to the world around them. Meaning and purpose was infused in all everyday events to make sense of a dangerous, difficult, and uncaring world. So we had rituals behind the sun, the moon, the planets, the wind, the earth, the oceans, in all societies. The rise of our physical understanding has slowly caused us to do away with those many gods. We no longer have Mars, the god of war, Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea, Thor, the god of storms. As Michael has said, everyone here, or maybe everyone, is now an atheist with respect to those gods. And there's a reason for that. Science has taught us that instead of capricious beings, there's an order to nature. And that order does not appear to involve a divinity. There's no need for a divinity. Laws of nature, describable by mathematics, make predictions that allow us to not only predict the future, but control it, without the need for any supernatural shenanigans. And in fact, it amazes me that asking the question, is God necessary, is somehow an evil thing. When we stop asking questions, that will be an evil thing. Science has taught us also that we want to believe, in the words of Fox Mulder. And we should be skeptical of those desires. As the physicist Richard Feynman told us, the easiest people to fool are ourselves. As scientists, we have to train ourselves to be skeptical of wanting to believe. And we should try and overcome our natural tendency to assume special significance to events. And human beings are also inevitably programmed to ask why, as we've heard it. But the why question is ill-posed, because it presumes purpose. It presumes the answer to the question before you ask the question. What if there is no purpose? Does there need to be purpose? And science tells us there's no evidence of purpose. So the why question is ill-posed. Our opponents want to keep the clock from ticking by avoiding the evidence of reality. And therefore, science, by telling us there's no need for purpose, has refuted the need for God, and that's why you should support our position.
Thank you, Lawrence Krauss. And that concludes our closing statements. And now it's time for you to judge which team has voted. Now it's time for you to judge which team has argued best. We're asking you again to go to the keypads at your seat that registered your vote as it did at the beginning, and we're going to get the readout almost instantaneously. As before, if you support motion number 1, if you support the motion, if you are with the motion, for the motion, push number 1. If you're against, push number 2. And if you're undecided or became undecided or remain undecided, push number 3. And we'll keep the voting open for about another 20 seconds. Everybody okay with that? Okay, we're going to lock out the voting. Oh, wait, I got somebody's still working on it. Indecision is a terrible thing. We're good? Okay. Yeah? Okay. All right, first of all, I want to thank this panel of debaters for being so energetic, honest, intelligent. They brought it all. Thank you. I also want to thank everyone who asked a question. The questions were really terrific tonight. Also, the folks who asked questions, and I didn't take them, there is no dishonor in that. I appreciate that you had the courage to get up and do this, so thank you to everybody who got up and asked a question today. The people who have been tweeting, you can keep going. If you want to tweet afterwards, our Twitter handle is @IQ2US, and the hashtag for this event is SciVGod. That's SCIV, as in versus God, all in one word. So to everybody who enjoyed themselves, we want you to know that we do this every month, and it's always this good, although we do all different kinds of topics, but we get very, very smart people up here on the stage to do this, to engage, really to pay each other the respect of listening to each other's arguments, if only to demolish them. But they do it, they listen, and that's a rare thing, and it lets you have the opportunity of really hearing two sides well articulated. So I want to talk a little bit, very briefly, about next season. We're going to be back here at the Kaufman Theater. We'll be debating nuclear Iran, genetic engineering, America's dollar policy, whether we need a strong dollar or not, the future of the Republican Party, and the Food and Drug Administration, where we're going to be looking at the issue of whether the rules that are in place for safety are actually hazardous to the health of Americans. Our first debate is coming up on Wednesday, January 16th. The motion that we're going with is Israel can live with a nuclear Iran. In support of that motion, James Dobbins, he's a former Assistant Secretary of State and a Special Envoy in the Clinton and Bush administrations. He's now a director at RAND. His partner will be Reuven Pedatzer. He's a senior military affairs analyst for Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper. He was also once a fighter pilot in the Israeli Air Force. Against the motion, Shmuel Bar, he is Director of Studies at the Institute for Policy and Strategy and a former Israeli intelligence officer. His partner is Jeffrey Goldberg, the award-winning journalist and national correspondent for The Atlantic. All journalists appear to be award-winning in all this. Said the three-time Emmy Award-winning. If you can't be in the audience for that, as you know from your participation tonight, there are a lot of ways that people out there can watch us, and you can too. You can watch the live stream on Fora.tv or listen to the debates on NPR here in New York City. That's on WNYC. And you can also watch them on WNET, the World Digital Channel, starting in January on PBS stations across the nation. Okay, the results are coming in now. Okay, I just needed to digest. And I want to put my glasses on for this. Okay, so it's all in. I have been given the results. Remember, the team that changes the most minds is declared the victor, and here it is. Before the debate, 37% agreed with the motion, 34% were against, and 29% were undecided. So those are the first results. Remember, the team that has the highest percentage change is declared the winner. In the second vote, let's go first to the team that was arguing for the motion. Their number went from 37% to 50%. That's a 13% increase. So the team arguing against the motion has to do better than 13%. Let's see how they did. Before the vote, 34%. The second vote, 38%. That's up 4%. It's not enough. The team arguing for the motion, Science Refutes God, has won the debate. Our congratulations to them. Thank you from me, John Donvan, and Intelligence Squared US. We'll see you next time.